Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure how many of us are out there in Zoom land on this call, but we will be recording this meeting. So those that don't get the benefit of the wisdom and conversation and insight that we'll be bringing to you here will be able to get it after the fact on demand in your jammies. Although maybe many of us are in our jammies now, just not those of us on video. So this is the first quarterly Bricks and Mortals event. We will be having obviously 3 others because these are quarterly, and this is going to give you some insight and some conversation and some examples on sharing your space. A little background on Bricks and Mortals for those of you that aren't familiar. Bricks and Mortals was really the brainchild of Donna Scopper, who was on the call, and really intended to help houses of worship better use their property to support themselves and to achieve mission, and really think uniquely about their space. And we are in the process of formalizing what is and has been an association, a grassroots association, to become a formalized not-for-profit with a 501c3 exemption. We're currently operating under Judson Memorial Church's exemption, and they have been kind enough to incubate us. In short, Bricks and Mortals' mission is to gather, educate, and advise faith-based institutions on facing the challenges of staying open and mission consistent in the context of aging buildings and declining membership, rising real estate costs, to raise public awareness about the rich resources that houses of worship are in New York City. We'll talk about New York City in a second, to document the variety of creative strategies that religious institutions might develop to sustain themselves and continue to provide essential services to New York City and their surrounding communities, and to educate the community about the importance of faith-based institutions and the needs that these institutions have regarding their property and their mission to continue to serve their charitable function. So if you are not already receiving information about Bricks and Mortals, please go to the website. It's judson.org//Bricks and Mortals, or if you Google Bricks and Mortals in Judson, it will come up, and we would love to send you additional information. So without further ado, I will introduce Karen, who will introduce our panel. Karen, I have had the privilege of working with on multiple occasions and presenting with just last week, the Rooftops Conference. That was a blast, Karen, thank you for that. And in addition to being a wonderful person and very informed and able in this area, Karen really embodies this marriage, as it were, of sacred places, preservation, and the arts. She has a background as an artist and has been working with Partners for Sacred Places for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but almost a decade now, right? Nine years plus. So very impressive. And Partners for Sacred Places is a national organization, is headquartered out of Philadelphia, although I think they have other offices. And specifically in New York City, Karen has been leading the Arts in Sacred Places initiative or project to really work with faith-based organizations and purpose-built religious buildings and spaces in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and try and create some mutually beneficial partnerships between arts programs and really focused on dance and these organizations. So thank you, Karen, and preemptive thank you to our panelists. And I look forward to hearing the discussion.
Thank you, Jason, for the very generous introduction. It was lovely working with you on the Rooftops experience as well. I want to, thank you, and thank you for the introduction to Bricks and Mortals, because this is our first panel discussion. So, it's a little bit of testing the water. So we're going to see how this goes, but I think it's going to be really great. As Jason said, I'm Karen DeLassi. I'm the Director of Arts and Sacred Places for Partners for Sacred Places. I'm happy to be moderating our discussion today. I think everyone is going to find a path towards a plan and a path towards hope in what has truly been a chaotic year. So before we begin, I would love all of the attendees, if they could take a really quick moment and just put your city and state into the chat box. Since this is our first event, we kind of want to have a better gauge of who received our message. So if folks could just take the time to do that while I'm introducing the panelists. So in no particular order, we have Reverend Peter Cook, who's the Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches, which represents 7,000 congregations across the state of New York. He's been a strong advocate for the development of affordable housing. He currently serves as the Vice President of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative and is directing the Council's Who is My Neighbor Community Development Initiative to help faith institutions use their property to better serve their town. The Council is also part of the Faith-Based Affordable Housing and Community Development Partnership, recently funded by the Trinity Church Wall Street. The partnership helps congregations in New York use their property to build affordable housing and promote more just housing policies. Ingrid Kaptein is an international performer, creator, collaborator, and teacher with a BFA in dance from Juilliard. As a performer, Ingrid has appeared in Sleep No More in New York City and Shanghai, and in productions by Brian Brooks, Danielle Russo, Wally Cardona, the Metropolitan Opera, and MacArthur Award winner Martha Clark at the Signature Theater. Ingrid has created, self-produced, and performed in unconventional venues across New York and Shanghai with her collectives Human and Welcome to Campfire. Ingrid also teaches masterclasses, workshops for Juilliard Global Ventures, Nord Anglia Education, NYU School of Medicine, UNCSA, and Princeton and Bucknell Universities. We have Sheldon Coy, who's the Administrative Director and Educator at Hebrew Tabernacle Congregation in Washington Heights, Manhattan. He was an elementary school teacher in the New York City Department of Education for 32 years. Upon retirement, he became a technology staff developer and soon after started working at Hebrew Tabernacle. He's proud to appear in the Netflix movie Crip Camp, as he worked at Camp Jened for 10 years, starting in 1968, eventually becoming co-director. Dania Collins has been with Trinity Academy in Philadelphia now for 3 years. She stepped into her role as director of the operation for Trinity Academy, bringing more than 20 years of leadership experience as an educator and school director. She has taught Head Start, pre-K, kindergarten, 4th and 8th grades, and has been a school director and director of operations. Dania hopes that children that leave her room having grown academically, socially, and emotionally, and who are proud of who they are and what they can and will accomplish. Reverend Dr. Kay Carpin is the senior pastor of St. Paul and St. Andrew United Methodist Church and has served his progressive congregation since 1984. He holds degrees from Cornell University and Union Theological Seminary. He has served for 15 years as the chaplain to Columbia University and is currently in his first term in Manhattan's Community Board 7, where he serves as co-chair of the Preservation Committee. He also serves on the board of directors of the West Side Campaign Against Hunger. He has taught at Drew Theological School and Union Theological Seminary. Prior to seminary, Kay served as a fellow of the Council on Economic Priorities. He is passionate about interfaith work, ministry with the poor and marginalized, and the possibility of an inclusive church. Donna Scopper is the senior minister at Judson Memorial Church, an adaptive, creative congregation and commons in Greenwich Village, New York City. She has written 35 books, most recently, I Heart You, Francis, Love Letters from a Reluctant Admirer. Her forthcoming book is RemoveThePews.com. Last week, she served as a jurist for Faith and Form, judging new sacred sites for adaptive reuses. She worked with many others to found Bricks and Mortals in New York City. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today and all of our attendees. So as the Director of Arts and Sacred Places for the past, Jason already added me out, 9 years, I have learned a lot about space sharing in sacred places and how that can be successfully accomplished through an in-depth process of mission and vision alignment. We look for congregations to share their space with artists and other important groups who speak to their mission and are the right fit. We want these partnerships to be mutually beneficial and align with both parties' mission and vision so that each one can see the other as an extension of that mission. When you're in search of a partner, someone who will share your space and hopefully someone you would boast about on your website or social media, we believe that there should be a stronger foundation. To do that, we take participants on a deeper dive into their missions, reflecting not just mission, but also vision, impact, and values, really breaking down why we do what we do and our internal drivers in that work. I think today's panelists have done some wonderful work in the arts, education, food, outreach, and housing. And I think by the end of our session, you'll have a clear understanding of mission-driven space sharing. While the income stream is always welcome, how often can you say that your mission is also served in the same way? So without further ado, we're going to start with some space sharing relationships that have sprung directly from my Arts and Sacred Places work, as well as some of the work I've been doing developing community learning hubs here in Philadelphia. So a little side note, I did get an email early this morning from Shelley, who was going to be joining us from Hebrew Tabernacle. I read his bio. He may not be able to actually log in. I'm hoping maybe he might be able to log in, but he actually, you know, as goes with 2020, he had to go in for a COVID test. So someone at the congregation is apparently in the hospital now, so he's taking every precaution. So we will lift prayers and good thoughts for him in the hopes that it comes back negative. But hopefully he'll also be able to join us for a bit. So these are some questions I have for Dania and Ingrid. For right now, I believe Dania is only on the phone. So hopefully, Dania, you should unmute yourself, Ingrid as well. So I would love for you to reflect on, you know, so Ingrid, how did you get together with your space sharing partner, and what was actually the thing that brought you together?
Hello, everyone. I'm grateful to be here. I am also incredibly grateful to have found Karen and her online training was that the late spring for space sharing? Once COVID had already hit. So pretty much overnight, as a dancer, all my work evaporated in March. Tours, performances, rehearsals, creation periods, residencies, gone. So my peers and I were floating, watching the projected date for the return of the arts be pushed farther and farther along the line, as we all have been experiencing in different ways, I know. So I attended Karen's online training and really quickly connected with Shelley, who runs Hebrew Tabernacle up on 185th and Fort Washington in Manhattan. And he generously opened the door right away once we'd learned about each other and each other's missions for one collaborator with whom I work and me to rehearse in an empty room called a social hall in the synagogue 3 days a week for 3 hours. And he allowed us to pay the same rate that we had been paying at rental dance studios across the city, which are now all closed, $10 an hour. But it was all a open and flexible dialogue, working out the logistics for how it could happen now. And as a result, I was able to find multiple outdoor performing opportunities towards the end of summer and into the early fall, which would not otherwise have been possible. So basically, the relationship enabled me to keep dancing in a time of paralysis otherwise. And I can't tell you how important that has been for my physical and mental and spiritual health in this time.
Thank you, Ingrid. Dania, can you talk a little bit about your partnership? Because this is something at least very new for me. But can you talk a little bit about Trinity Academy and Trinity Lutheran and Sunrise? If you're still on mute, Dania, because you're not on video, so I can't see you. Okay. We will, so Dania, if you get on, if you can unmute yourself or somehow be able to join us, just go ahead and shout out. I'm gonna keep going with Ingrid a little bit more. So Ingrid, when you developed a system of space sharing, and even in light of, Shelley obviously going for a COVID test today, what was the system that both of you were most comfortable with? I'm thinking about cleaning protocols, cleanliness, things of that nature.
What helped us feel safe about even the conversation right away is that I was only, oh, I heard an echo, sorry. I was only ever planning to work with one other person, and no one else was in the building except in an office upstairs when we were asking to work. So we don't cross paths with anyone. And we agreed to give the space a mop after we finish every day. And we, of course, wore masks in and out of the building. And as the COVID situation developed over the summer, we kept in close contact, adding like a temperature check as the city was just detailing its protocols at every step, making sure that each party felt safe was the priority.
Gotcha, thank you. Dania, did I see that you were able to get on?
Yeah, I am here. I do apologize. I have been playing with this Zoom. I do not know why I cannot get on with my iPad, but I do apologize.
We hear you loud and clear. So, so can you talk a little bit about the Community Learning Hub and Trinity Academy, which is within Trinity Lutheran, and its partnership with Sunrise?
Sure. It was an absolute blessing having you introduce us to Sunrise. We had a space that was available because we did not open the school. And the partnership has just been absolutely phenomenal. It's the respect and also becoming a team and letting them understand that I understand what they're trying to accomplish, that I'm here for them, whatever they need. But most of all, that we all have a goal, and the goal is to make sure that children are receiving everything that they possibly need. And for them to understand that even though they are renting space, but we're all still a team.
Dania, can you explain a little bit? A lot of these folks are from New York.
Okay.
Can you explain a little bit about what you're doing with Sunrise?
Sunrise is renting space from Trinity. They're renting the school as well as some of the space from the school. I think the only areas they aren't using is our sanctuary and our chapel. The Sunrise program has a hub going on where they have pods for children who parents have to go to work. And the program was started through the city of Philadelphia. The city of Philadelphia actually gives a list of children to Sunrise. So the city of Philadelphia takes care of the children who are going to enroll in this program. And they are able to have everything that they possibly need. We supply the internet. They did how they basically cut up the area. So they're using our gym and as well as the parish hall, if I can give you some kind of visual. And it's almost like a maze because of the dividers that they have throughout the rooms so that everyone has space between each other.
Yeah, and just to flesh it out for folks, and because I have the screen as well. So if you can imagine like a large fellowship hall, there's a divider right down the middle that will divide like these. They're about 3,000 square feet, the gym and the fellowship hall around that. And per city guideline, there needs to be 40 square feet per person, whether it's an adult or a child. So 25 people is 1,000 square feet.
Yes.
So they're able to fit up to 88 people in those two spaces total. So just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a visual there too. And Dania, while I still, before I move on to the next subject, because I had moved on with Ingrid a little bit. So what about
No problem.
what about the system of space sharing, like cleaning protocols, cleanliness, like what's the system that you and Sunrise have put in place?
Well, the great thing about it, we all follow the CDC regulations in reference to cleaning. That's number one. Number two is that Sunrise is responsible for their own cleaning. If they need anything additional, I have our maintenance guy go over and take care of whatever additional items that they may need. But for the most part, Sunrise is responsible for their cleaning and disinfecting those areas.
And is that a daily or weekly routine?
They do that daily. They actually have a gentleman their maintenance guy, who goes around and cleans constantly, because that is a part of the CDC protocol. You know, whenever someone uses the restroom, the doorknobs, the handles. So he's constantly cleaning in the morning, the afternoon, and at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits and the challenges, Ingrid and Dania. So
Sure.
in terms of sharing space at this time versus when you would share space pre-COVID, what do you feel are the benefits, challenges that you've incurred? Are there things that have kind of come to mind now that things have really shifted? Kind of in my mind, feel like it's almost like I had taken things for granted so much, and now it's just you can't leave the house without your mask. So, what
Absolutely.
are some of the benefits or challenges that you feel like you've both experienced?
I can go. I would have to say the two things that definitely the mask, and you take for granted prior to COVID, is you were able to go into a space and not think about that you're contaminating the space. So those are some of the things that are different, because I would have easily been able to walk in to see whatever they needed, where now I have to meet them at the door, or they have to come over to my space. But it's even though it sounds complicated, it's you just take it with a smile and can constantly remember the mission, and that this is also a ministry. It has, I think COVID has been difficult for everyone this year. And it's, at this point, you just constantly say to yourself, there has to be a finish line to this. There has to be a lesson that God is trying to tell us.
Thank you for sharing that. And I couldn't agree more. Ingrid, what about you?
My first feeling is just how miraculous it's been, the timing that this opportunity came up at a moment when there were no other opportunities. So I feel insanely lucky. At the same time, I think the relationship, and I hope that it could exist, and I hope that it will exist into a future when COVID is not in our daily life. It would just be the same without as much cleaning, without as much protocol, because being able to align with a community organization that's closer to my apartment, that actually has more space than most dance studios, that might have more scheduling to work around with other groups using the same space. But I imagine that even though this is a COVID time arrangement at the moment, it could continue. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just kind of one of those things where I know that there was a reason why, partners got a grant to start doing work in New York City. Because obviously the need for space is there. So what I'm learning now, and you can agree or not, Ingrid, is that it seems as though the need for space is even greater. Because as you mentioned, like studios are closing, and we just, can you briefly touch on like what the future of the rehearsal studios, and that wouldn't just impact dancers, it might impact theater makers, music, a lot of the performing arts. Can you just give us a little hint into that world?
Absolutely. Pre-COVID, just talking about rehearsal space for a moment, there are 5 to 10 studios between Manhattan and Brooklyn that I would look to rent rehearsal space at. And they have all been closed since March. I think I've heard that 2 of them have opened under really limited conditions. But that's nothing compared to the space availability before. Also, I signed up for your training in the before. So even though I had those accesses before, it still wasn't enough. In terms of what the future might look like, it's a total black hole question mark still for the arts, as Broadway is now pushed to the spring of 21 for reopening, but with a likely push farther than that. And as I'm sure everyone knows, like big symbolic institutions like the Met or New York City Ballet are not going to have their next season. They've announced they won't start until next year. So all of the smaller organizations in the city follow suit. And though we may have a little more flexibility to work in small capacities like this one, there's no talk of being able to invite normal sized audiences into theater situations until there's a vaccine.
Right.
I don't think that can be very different than what you all are experiencing, or what we all are in different ways, but it means that dancers, my boyfriend is an actor, he's spent most of the last 6 months out of the city because there's no reason to be here, because there's no work.
Right.
So,
yeah, I just kind of like, it's interesting, like in my job, I get to kind of cross paths with people both in the faith world, people in the arts, people in education, and there's a lot of different, there's just a lot of different bubbles that people have. So I think it's always kind of interesting to kind of, take a snapshot of what someone in another field might be experiencing. So thank you. Dania, I just to kind of talk really quickly about, what are the challenges of sharing your space with this, with basically an out of school time provider that's providing school time work. But what are some of the challenges, and is it ultimately worth it?
To me, it's worth it. It has been not just from a financial point of view, but just the fact that we just built bridges and connected and built a relationship. And we're even talking about different partnerships for when the school year is done for Sunrise. So to me, it's worth it. It's been such a great opportunity working with Ben and Marissa and Vince. Oh my gosh, Vince is a one of a kind. They call me on a regular. I call to check on them, see how they're doing, if they need anything. So I have to say that we've been extremely blessed. There are challenges. I would have to say that some of the challenges have been with maybe some of the council members. Sometimes I have a background at working for several different churches and different religious organizations. Sometimes we forget that it's okay to share this space. And you do have some that are set in their ways, and you just have to remind them of the great opportunities that are going to flourish from this relationship. Outside of that, I really haven't had any challenges or any issues with Sunrise renting the space from us.
Well, can you go a little bit, because I think a lot of folks on this call may that working within their interior councils or lay leaders may resonate with a lot of our audience.
Oh.
Can you just go into a little bit of kind of what, you don't have to go into specifics, but just kind
Absolutely.
of like what,
And, you know, you're going to have some that are just set in their ways, and it's showing them that, hey, this is what could happen. These are the great things. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't have council members who I had to sway to take this opportunity. But I did have two that one was not as bad as the other one. But that's expected, because they see the church as their home. They've been a church member for years. Are the renters going to respect their church? Are they going to respect the church in the way that they respect the church? And that's where the whole ministry part comes in. That I had to remind them that this is God's house, and that we are doing God's ministry, and that this organization does need us. But most of all, this is a great opportunity. There are some children who parents may go, wow, this church is absolutely beautiful. Why don't we come here one Sunday? Or let's look at what there may be someone who needs you to pray for them or to pray with them. So it's sometimes we can be, you can have some council members that may be a little standoffish, and you at this point in time, me personally, I know how to approach them so that I could sway them into, this is a great opportunity. Not everything is going to be bubblegum and lollipops, especially with council and especially with a church board. It's trying to get them to see the big picture, that they will respect the church.
Thank you so much. I think that really kind of certainly resonates with a lot of the work that Partners does, and that mission and vision alignment. It's kind of like reminding them that maybe this other group can express our mission just as well, and that part of our mission is helping them to do their great work, because it helps us to do ours. So excellent. Thank you, Dania.
You're so welcome.
So what, for Ingrid and for Dania, just kind of want to have a couple other wrap up questions. I think we're trying to get Shelly on. He's been texting me a little bit, so hopefully he'll be able to kind of give us some closing thoughts before we can wrap up this section. But I wonder, is there what will you hope people take away from your individual experiences? Ingrid, what do you hope that folks will take away from hearing about your experiences within Hebrew Tabernacle and the work that you've been able to produce? What do you hope? And knowing that this is mostly people of faith on the line.
First, again, this relationship has been the difference between me having space to dance and me having no space to dance in this time. And that's truly life-changing for me and my collaborator and the audiences with whom we were able to share our work. Hi, Shelley. He's here.
Yes, here I am. Hi.
Just finishing up answer. And we will answer the questions like about formal agreements, which there are, and signing. But overall, in my perspective, the coming together has not been too complicated. It wasn't a really hard situation to work out. It was rather seamless because we figured out that we connected really early on. And so maybe that can be hopeful for anyone too, that if this interests you, it can happen surprisingly easily with Karen's help and generosity.
Thank you, Ingrid. So, Shelley, since we have you, I want to do a little bit of, I want to get a little bit of Hebrew Tabernacle's perspective on what we've been talking about a little bit. So, just talking about, do you feel like there's been, we're all keeping our fingers crossed for your COVID test, by the way. Hoping for no news, right? No news is good.
Right.
So, is there, what do you feel have been the benefits and challenges in hosting an artist at this time? Just kind of want to hear a little bit about, from your perspective.
Right. So the benefit is that one of our missions as a congregation, as an institution, is to become a community center. And hosting the arts is really a great way to achieve that goal. We have had other artists with us in the past. We had a theater company, the Up Theater Company. We had the Anthropologists, which is another theater company, doing performances in our building. Ingrid is the first dance company that we've had, and it was actually easier because of the whole COVID thing, because we're really nobody's coming into the building except Ingrid and Tony and a couple other people. There are no real functions going on. So that made it kind of easy to do that. And the benefit again is, we want people to be in our building. We want people from the community in our building. We want our building to be used because for the most part, it was vacant. It is vacant, especially even before COVID. It's vacant during the day. So it's really a good use of it. I mean, there's a little bit of a financial consideration, but that's not really the prime consideration. The prime consideration is opening the doors to people. And I have to just say, Karen, that your assistance in bringing us together and just in all of the workshops that you ran were very informative and really made it kind of easy to do this, because you saw other people using, other companies using sacred spaces so meaningfully. And I mean, just your thoroughness in coming early, coming to our building, visiting us pre-COVID and taking pictures and talking to us about what we could offer and what was needed was really very helpful as well. So I mean, part of the success of this it really is a result of, and thanks to your hard work in getting it set up. And Ingrid and I connected when she said where she was located. And I said, okay, that's a short ride up on the A train. So I just chatted to her and said, let's figure this out. Because as I said, the building was not being used, and our president is very much in favor of this kind of activity. So it was really kind of easy, and the president was instrumental in sort of selling it to the licensing committee. Not that they really needed too much arm twisting, but just to say this is a nice thing to do, and even with COVID, it's not going to be a problem. So.
That's great, and it actually brings up another point, something that we've been able to kind of uncover in our work, and with this partnership as an example, is that folks may be staying closer to home. So are there congregations within their neighborhood, or, you know, for the congregations on the line, like, are there neighborhood groups, whether it's an artist or whether it's a different nonprofit or social service organization, or food pantry? Is there another organization out there that could benefit, that's close by? And now you're talking about really kind of a hyper local support, which I feel like we all really need right now. I know that, you know, we don't travel very far from our house these days. So, so kind of having that proximity is something that can be really important. I just want to, we have a couple more minutes before I'm going to open up for Q&A for these folks specifically. So I want to just kind of give, we'll go back to Dania for a moment. Dania, is there a piece of advice that you would like to offer folks that are thinking about going down this, you know, as you're in this education partnership path? Is there a piece of advice you would want to give folks?
I would have to say it's just a great opportunity, and just to do it. You know, it's a great opportunity not only to open up God's house to individuals that may not have gone to church or need that connection, but it's a great connection for the church to do the ministry, and it's a component where education and ministry become one. I love the opportunity in which that was given to us with Sunrise.
Great. So kind of the advice I hear from Dania is, when opportunity knocks, you answer. Ingrid and Shelley, is there a piece of advice that you would like to pass on? And again, we're going to go to Q&A for this particular group, but is there a piece of advice that you want people to hear?
Well, so again, this is something that you stressed, Karen, in one of the workshops. It's communication. Just make sure that you know what you're able to provide and what you need, and, you know, just iron out all the details about timing and sharing space, and you know, what expectations there are. And you know, communication is really the key to the whole thing, to making it work, and just making expectations known.
Ingrid, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Agreed with both. And something you made really clear in the training is that this is not a one-size-fits-all proposition, and that each partnership creates a different recipe in real time for what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really helpful for seeing it as a personal and individual case that is flexible to morph to what we envision together.
Great, thank you. I swear I did not give any of these people money to say any of the things that they're saying, but I really appreciate it. So I'm actually going to ask for Rhonda's assistance. I have not been paying attention to the chat box or the Q&A box, but want to open it up to questions. While Rhonda's reading those over, I do want to say that for any folks on the line that are in Manhattan or Brooklyn and are interested in learning more about our New York City work with dance makers, we still have room for participants. So if you go to sacredplaces.org/NYC, or you can email me directly, kdelassie@sacredplaces.org. And I'm happy to kind of connect you or talk to you in any way, shape, or form. I'm very easy to find on the internet. So Rhonda, do we have any questions from folks?
Yes, we have a bunch of really great questions. And I think we've had two come in talking about, specifically about formal leases. So the first is, do you have any formal leases with the arts tenants? And how do you resolve differences? And we sort of like steered around this question. So if you could directly answer a question about, you know, formal leasing.
Yeah,
process.
so Hebrew Tabernacle has a formal license agreement, we call it. with Ingrid, specifying a nominal fee and just laying out the timing and stuff like that. But again, the communication, the ongoing communication is important. And again, I have to really stress, it's much easier because our building is essentially empty during the day. So there really is no question about sharing the spaces or anybody stepping on anybody else's toes, so to speak. And not that way I would step on your toes. But, so with us, it's really rather easy. And that's one of the things that really drove us to want to do it. And that's one of the things that made it so easy for us to accommodate Ingrid's company. But yeah, we do have a formal license agreement. So yeah, that was worked out. It's a standard form that we use. And we just gave Ingrid a recurring kind of a license. So, but yeah, there is a formal agreement.
Dania, do you want to add anything?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, Karen. We have a formal. We do have a formal lease. My background also is real estate, so I was able to put that together, and that was something that both parties did sign.
And I will say, just having done this, even pre-COVID, having done this for 9 years, that we do recommend that whether it's short-term, long-term, recurring, that there be some kind of formal agreement. We have a tendency, because we work all throughout the country, to call them space sharing agreements, because some parts of the country have different laws than other ones. But licenses, leases, space sharing agreements, you should have something very formal written up, and that's really for the protection of both sides. And also in terms of, communication is key. And if you have communication, and if you ask for permission, not forgiveness, and you're open and honest with your needs, hey, we see Dania now, that then you'll be able to actually have the best possible relationship with one another. It's based on honesty and trustworthiness. So, we also put in there a mediation clause. We put in there, like, usually in the contracts that Partners has helmed, we have put in there, who to talk to, like who are the frontline communication folks on both sides, and then what is the line of communication. And then we always recommend that there be, if the dispute gets really bad, that they go to mediation instead of something much more drastic. So yes, we do have those kinds of things as well.
There was another question that's submitted that was linked to that one. It was asking, do you include a hold harmless clause should a guest or renter contract the virus? And this is coming in from Juliet.
I'm gonna leave that. So I'm gonna send that to Shelley, Dania, and Ingrid. Has there been any kind of hold harmless?
In terms of COVID specifically?
Yes, in terms of COVID.
No, our legal folks tell us that whole thing is so up in the air that we're not even dealing with it, honestly. What we're doing, and Ingrid was kind enough to really rapidly cooperate on this, is we're having anybody who comes in as a licensee fill out the New York State form for how you're dealing with COVID precautions, keeping everything safe, and just following the government guidelines. So each organization has to fill that out. But as far as liability stuff, no, we have not. And I'm pretty sure, Ingrid, correct me if I'm wrong, you have insurance, right? Did we do that with you? Because I get confused. We have a number of different licenses going on, but I'm pretty sure that you have your own insurance.
I must say I do not. It was something that I was willing to acquire if necessary.
So then what we did is that we sponsored your activity. And that's the way to get the activity. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to check on this before the meeting, but I didn't get a chance, obviously. But what we do in that kind of situation is that we sponsor the activity, so it's covered under our insurance. So I'm sure that we are sponsoring your activity, Ingrid, and doing it that way. Also, just as a real quick aside, so Ingrid was very cooperative in terms of, in the summertime, not using air conditioning. Not the room that she's using is pretty well lit, so she wasn't turning on electricity, turning on lights and stuff like that, and that made it easier for us in terms of keeping our costs down. Because it's a big space that she was in, and to air condition it would be crazy expensive, especially for, you know, for two people. But also I just saw in the Q&A, there's also something about ventilation. So we also asked that all the windows be kept open and stuff like that. And that usually is a pretty good way of doing it. So sorry for that quick aside, it just triggered the thought. But so insurance is something that definitely needs to be worked out. So, but again, no specific liability clause for COVID right now.
Yeah, do you
Thank you.
have something specific that you're working with in that respect?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sorry, I was
I'm
asking
sorry.
if you were having any hold harmless or waiver. I know that when Jason and I presented just last Friday, we definitely did talk about, or Jason talked about potentially waivers, people signing waivers before entering a facility, things like that. So do you have anything?
Absolutely. Well, Sunrise has their own insurance. That's number one. Number two is the Sunrise does follow the protocol, and where no one can enter the building without answering the questions as well as their temperature being checked, and that's for the children and the staff.
Right. And I think during the day, correct me if I'm wrong, Dania, only the children and their direct supervisors are the ones going into the building, correct?
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Because I know I went there opening day to help celebrate, and I could just kind of peek in through the door. And
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Rhonda, any other questions?
Yes. So we had a great one coming about using different types of guidances. So it says, how do you navigate the COVID guidelines set for different types of venues as your church moves into multi-use? Do you follow the house of worship guidelines, or are you looking at guidance for performing arts or entertainment venues, for example?
So we're following House of Worship guidelines, which again, you know, our relationship with Ingrid is kind of unique because she's only bringing in two people. So it cuts out it just cuts a lot of issues right off. And again, there's no co-use, so to speak, of our space. It's hers exclusively. But we do make sure that it's desanitized and all the surfaces are clean and the floors are mopped and all the other stuff. And she and Tony usually clean up after they leave. But we are following House of Worship guidelines from New York State. We're in New York State.
I know, having read, I'm going to let Dania reply as well, but I know
Okay.
I've been reading a lot of these because I'm preparing a little bit of a, you know, how do I prep my space to be shared? So I've read the performing arts, indoor, outdoor, house of worship, and there's a lot of crossover. Is what I've noticed. So there may be some changes here and there, but it's a lot of it is, you know, it kind of crosses over.
Absolutely. We follow the school district's guidelines in the city of Philadelphia, because after all, with the Sunrise is partnership with the city of Philadelphia. So, and we also have to follow the school district because because it is a licensed organization with DHS.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Rhonda, for folks?
Yes, so this was the question that was submitted over chat, and this question is saying, how do houses of worship contact or find groups interested in sharing space? So I know we touched on this, but if you guys could be more direct about how you outreach to some of the organizations who might want to use the space.
Well, I'm going to tackle that first and say, obviously, you need to contact me.
That's what I was going to say.
It is kind of, it is like all I do. I love doing it though. So I obviously really do love bringing people together for lots of different purposes. So, but aside, you know, all kidding aside, I do think it is it is becoming a little more difficult because of, not just because of COVID, but also I know Fractured Atlas, which was running the Space Finder program, which was in New York and Philadelphia and a lot of cities across the country. They recently stopped. So that whole database of spaces that folks used to be able to go online for free, post their space, and space users used to be able to search through is now gone. So I'm hoping that we can, at least with the first 20 from our phase 1, the first 20 sacred places, and then as we get into phase 2, we're hoping to add 30 more sacred places, that we can kind of help to build up that database a little bit more. So and certainly we've been in contact with dance makers and other folks as partners start to expand our work in New York City specifically. But I know that a lot of it is very grassroots in terms of connecting with folks. I do think looking at your immediate community, particularly like right now, I would not be anti-flyering post-election when you can kind of get everybody's attention. I know everybody's attention is a little divided right now. So, but I think definitely flyering, and definitely, if you have a church and you have a front, putting up a sign, and kind of advertising. No one's going to know you have space to share unless you tell them you have space to share. If your congregation has a website, put it on your website. Space sharing, space for use or rental, or however you want to phrase it, and really kind of get down to like, what does your space entail? How many spaces do you have? Get some pictures up, do some measurements, talk about maybe some past events, but really kind of build that up on your website, which is your face to the outside world. So Ingrid, Shelley, Dania, do you have any other things to add to that list?
I would say I owe it all to Karen this time around, but as someone who's constantly looking for space, if you post on your website or on your door, I would see it if you were in my neighborhood. And I know that would be the same for a lot of my fellow dancers.
Yeah, I would also suggest like putting it something in like neighborhood newspapers kind of thing. Just that you have space available and people will see it. And I know in Manhattan we have listservs, which are usually directed towards parents, but they could be open to other people as well. And you can put it on the listserv, and even if it's just a parent listserv, the parents will see it and spread the word. And sometimes the parents are the people who are looking for the space. The Anthropologists theater group is run by a woman who has 2 kids in our Hebrew school. So, she and I communicated directly, but that would be another way. And also just local politicians, local community organizations, but politicians also. If you let your local city council people or your assembly people, whatever the lower level, local politician people are, that you have space and you're looking for people or looking for organizations to use it, and you're willing to open up your doors, then they can maybe connect you that way because they have contacts at both ends too.
Yeah, and I think, thank you. Those are all actually really good, interesting ones. And I'm thinking about it, if you're posting a sign in front of your space saying you have space to share, think of your website as like, if you're hoping to get foot traffic on the street, websites are going to be your foot traffic online, because, people like Ingrid are going to be just Googling maybe spaces in this zip code or whatever, spaces for rent. So just kind of think about that a little bit. And I love the community newspaper angle too. I know that we've actually found like a lot of contractors from our local, very hyper local newspaper. So not the citywide newspaper, but the one that kind of gets thrown on our step every week. And also you should think about different websites like Nextdoor, which I know is like kind of, very hyper local in terms of neighborhood, not just the borough, but it might be neighborhood based. So that's another good place too, if you're like, I want to start sharing my space. Rhonda, we probably have time for maybe like one more question.
Yes, so we did have some, just to say, we did have some a follow-up question on that, and it was asking specifically about your work with partnerships for sacred spaces, sacred places. And they were asking, do you provide training? And the other is, do you actively broker the relationship between the user of the space and the owner of the space? And after that, there's one additional question I think is very important. So if you could answer that sort of like succinctly. And there's one other question about subsidy that I think is important for us to talk about.
Absolutely. The answer is yes to both. We do provide training. Again, if you go to sacredplaces.org/NYC, and I had given Rhonda, I think, that link and a bunch of other links that she's probably going to send out. The link to participate, you fill out that form and you'll get a call from me or my colleague Allison about setting up a time to talk. So that is certainly yes, and that's for training. And then for the brokering, I have definitely been like big time brokering, and then kind of like a little more soft, like with Ingrid and Shelley, it was just kind of like, you know, helping to guide them, but they already had all the tools that they needed. So to more or less degree, but the answer is still yes. Follow-up question?
Erin, could I just build on what you said? So, you know, we have people on this call who are from all parts of the state, not just New York City. And I hope that those who are not in New York City can take these basic lessons about reaching out to your community, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But if you call Karen, just to let her know you're thinking about this, to draw on their resources, then you can also call the Council of Churches, and we can introduce you to some people and take you through some pre-assessment stuff as well, that, you know, so that people across the state have these options.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter, actually, for because I haven't been paying attention to the chat box, so I don't know where people are saying they're from. But I've been in South Bend, Indiana, doing this work, San Francisco doing this work, Austin doing this work, and even Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So, you know, it kind of doesn't matter big or small, definitely kind of, I've seen it all. So yeah, my door is always open and happy to have a conversation.
Thanks.
So there's one
Yeah, so I
additional
just want to
question.
point out there's someone in the chat was disappointed that we didn't talk about the ventilation question. So I think that's an important thing. I did mention for us, we did not use any air conditioning. Our building's been closed all summer, but air conditioning is a possible potential problem in terms of spread of COVID. So it was not applicable in our situation with Ingrid because we didn't turn the air conditioning on and we opened the windows. But I know that there's all sorts of new filters that are required with air conditioning. And as I said, we didn't have to get into that. But the ventilation thing, from what we know, is just make sure you have as many windows open as you can, just to have air circulating.
And I know we lost Dania, but at least I think we did. But I know that checking that your windows do actually open and that you can get airflow if not the windows, then the doors. Some people have been putting fans. And there are definitely, as Shelley had said, there's definitely some concern about, you know, in terms of filters and other things that would definitely, that goes down like a road of health information that I'm still reading and learning about a little bit. But I think Bricks and Mortals may be hosting in the future, very soon future, an event specifically about the health related concerns. So we can definitely add that to the list to tackle later. Rhonda.
I'm just
Yeah,
looking at I'm just looking at the follow-up here in the chat. If there is a lot of thinking that goes into this stuff about ventilation and what works and what doesn't, and whether windows work or if that's enough. And again, you can go on to the New York State Council Churches website, and I put the link in the chat that gives you some resources to deal with that, including some webinars. But I would, talk very specifically with your congregation where you're at to be sure that they're up to speed on what's safe in terms of their best understanding of the guidance.
Yep.
And so that's what I would encourage.
So Rhonda, I know there was like one more question. We really do have to move on though.
Yeah, so my question was actually, so combining Brenda's question, another question from that we gotten submitted from a participant, Lisa Wright. They were asking specifically about heating and cooling, combining these questions, but also asking if there are any subsidies or grants for houses of worship to support the initiative. Seems essentially expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I have assisted in space sharing relationships, I like for the congregation to know what their expenses are, what they like actually are, which does mean putting in a little bit of data crunching. Can be a total, I'm not gonna lie, it's a total pain in the butt. But getting together all of your expenses for the year, and especially like in a normal year, let's see what it's like in a normal year. What is an average of those expenses? And if you were going to be able to rent something by the hour, by the week, by the whatever, to be able to break it down to how much that specific space in terms of the total square footage. So you have to know your square footage too, total footprint. How much does that specific space cost you to let out, to rent? So, and to know so that you can make an active decision, are you subsidizing the artist yourself or the other organization, or are they covering the costs? So it is very difficult to know, but if you do the number crunching, you're going to come up with at least a really good estimate, I think. So, and I know that at least I have been searching and searching, and maybe there's someone on the line right now who would love to subsidize this space sharing work for artists, for education, for food. I know I would be open to that conversation because I would love to help out folks like Ingrid, Shelley, and Dania, who are either opening up their spaces or using their spaces, and using their precious resources to do so. I think it's definitely something that we've definitely looked for and have not quite gotten. I got it when we first started 9 years ago. I had subsidies for actual space sharing, and it was wonderful. And I wish it would have been able to continue. So not as of right now. The artists or other groups and the congregations are making it work with what they have.
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I agree. I do want to apologize. Let me tell you, there's remodeling going on in my house, and the contractors hit the circuit breaker, and I'm like, what happened to the internet?
Oh no. It's all good. It's all good.
All of a sudden you were frozen. I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me.
It's all good. I mean, just we're all living our best COVID lives, and that it wouldn't be that without at least one frozen screen.
Oh.
So I want to thank all three of you for your participation and your collaboration and your cooperation, everything. You've been so lovely to work with, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Karen. Also shout out to Allison for her nice work as well.
Yes, I think she might be listening, so she will have heard that.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. We're gonna move on to the next segment, which we're going to be talking with Kay Carpin, Peter Cook, and Donna Stopper about some food, housing, and community outreach as well. So I'm going to kind of start the conversation and start opening it up. So for Donna, Peter, and Kay, do you feel that you can still work to serve your communities and your ministries in this current climate?
a really good question. I mean, it's not getting easier.
No.
And I think the answer is, of course we can. And in fact, if anything, our communities are shifting very quickly. You know, once you go to a Zoom or a Facebook or Live or a YouTube Sunday service, people you haven't seen for years can check in from California.
Mhm.
And in our particular congregation, many people have also left because they don't like the Zoom experience or the online experience. So serving which congregation? I mean, I love that this seminar is named Who is Your Neighbor? And I think it's kind of exciting to be able to reach people who are unreachable in the ordinary space, place-based format. But I don't know what that means yet. And I'm particularly concerned about people who are either allergic to technology or who are older or who are not digital natives and what they have lost. And I don't know how to give them back what they've lost. So it's a complex question, which is answered yes, of course.
It's still
Well,
possible.
I think COVID has really provided for congregations the opportunity to remind themselves why they exist. When you have a building and everything's easy and there's nothing to worry about, the church can easily kind of turn into a kind of a country club. It looks inward. It's about preserving the space. It's about preserving themselves. All of these things, of course, are deadly, metaphorically speaking, to a congregation. So I'm really hesitant to say that COVID is a gift. Of course, it's not. It's a disaster, but it does push us as congregations to think about who's around us and to get out of defining ourselves in terms of just our fortress, but who's around us in our neighborhoods, in our city, in our world, and really pushing us to, kind of revisit who we are,
Mhm.
which I think is very healthy.
Guess, yeah, all the above. I don't know, Karen, is this a good time to do show and tell?
Anytime is a good time.
Okay, I just prepared some pictures because to try to describe how this is happening and how to, all the changes just, I don't know. So anyway, I have some pictures and I'll try to share my screen and run through them quickly and then, see if anything. Okay, so we're on the west side of Manhattan. As you can see, it's a huge building, but it's mostly, big sanctuary. It's like late 19th century space, so not always conducive for the kind of work that we're talking about. I was going to focus on the food aspect of what we do, so that's I'll just run through these. Prior to COVID-19, we had a grocery store where people could come in and make their own selections and get the food that they needed for their families. They were then checked out by an army of volunteers, mostly who were older folks who would then now be at risk for infection, and we had to really rethink that one in a hurry. Always had a focus on fresh food, so that has stayed the same. All the educational stuff that we were doing. This is a culinary training program that was just so beloved, and that's gone out the window because you just don't do that anymore. All right, so what's happened since? COVID struck us in March. And we had a problem in the building. And so we quickly shut down everything, cleaned everything professionally for the low price of $15,000. which allowed us to restart the operation, but we restarted outside in the street. Not the way we like to do things, but the way we thought was safest for the hundreds of families who were coming to us for help more than ever, of course, with the economic downturn. And also the volunteers. We went through New York Cares and just got an army of younger, hopefully less vulnerable volunteers to work. We have 40 to 50 a day who come in to help us. And of course, huge quantities of food were also necessary. Tried to keep this emphasis on fresh produce, healthy food. As I mentioned, just the need is enormous. And I think those of you on the call who are doing similar work in your congregations, your situations will attest to that. This is 2 blocks from the church, and it's a long line of people. And again, not the way we like to serve people. We like to serve people with dignity, as the door of our mobile food pantry there says, dignity, community, and choice. A lot of that has, of necessity kind of gone by the wayside. So we're going, the short answer to your question, we're going, but we're going in some very different ways. This is our social hall. It used to be a place where we would do classes and a nice, comfortable waiting space, but now, of course, it's just devoted to many square feet of packing food, getting produce in bags, and these bags are just handed to people now on the street. We realized we needed more space, so we got our young adult group together. Our sanctuary is huge, and it wasn't being used because we can't do that right now. So we cleared out some space, and then we figured out another way to use the pews, since they weren't full of people, to be full of food that we were sorting out for distribution here on site and also around the city. Sanctuary turned out to be, useful for the pallets of food that were now coming in, not by the case, but by the pallet, and distributed. Makes actually a pretty good warehouse, as you can see. I don't know. It's also been useful for those few times we've needed to do in-person worship, for like a small funeral, which is also live streamed, of course, but for the family to be able to gather. So we just use the pews full of food to kind of divide up the space so that people aren't on top of each other. We're being creative, like all of us are. I mentioned the young adults, the under 30 crowd being just so valuable to the volunteer effort right now, both inside the building and out on the street. Bless them. Sadly, as we were saying earlier on the call, a lot of our volunteers are in the arts, and they have time, but I worry about them as well and their livelihoods getting by. All the things we used to do in person, we had to go virtual with all our big fundraisers. So we just last week had a harvest dinner where we prayed and hoped people would help the effort online, even though they weren't getting any food for it or any entertainment. But we were able to raise about $250,000 at that harvest, our foodless harvest dinner, and our virtual cocktail hour with no cocktails, or bring your own cocktails. Everything else has gone virtual. Our gathering of turkeys, we're trying to get 5,000 for the holidays. That's all. People are doing that online and ordering and sending. All our social service, we have 5 social workers here. They're all doing their work online and remotely. We teamed up with DoorDash to do delivery for seniors, so they didn't have to come here on site. So that's been a helpful thing, at least in the short run. And we are bringing the food to where people are. This load is going to New York Presbyterian Hospital, which is supplying food to their discharged patients and others who are food insecure in their neighborhood up in Washington Heights. That's what's happening there. We've had to rent 4 trucks.
Okay, I have a really quick question for you.
Yes.
We know that, at least I remember when we did our site visit,
Yeah.
and it is a massive, massive space.
Yes.
that you did a lot with prepared foods as well. So are you doing, or it seemed, at least there was cooking going on when we were there. So has that all kind of just gone? Or are you doing any kind of,
That's
hot
been
food
that's been
preparation?
moved off site to a different facility. So we're not doing it we were doing Meals on Wheels for the
Okay.
seniors. They're still getting that, but it's been consolidated and moved out of our space.
Got it. Okay.
Now,
Thank
which
you.
makes, I mean, I miss it, but it also makes it a little bit easier in terms of what we were talking about with precautions and so forth.
Mhm, mhm.
In the middle of this, of course, we had, anybody who has an older church building, we had a roof leak and a ceiling cave in, and so quickly had to raise. It's been now, I guess, close to $500,000 for roof and interior repairs. And people were very, very generous. We got help from New York Landmarks Conservancy, which some of you will know about, and also the United Methodist City Society, a denominational group that was very supportive, and also our church member. We didn't know if people would give to something, to us, help us use a space that they couldn't gather in anymore. But people seem to believe in the mission and so forth. And and then last week we got a little recognition from the local newspaper there about the work that we were doing in the sanctuary. So anyway, that's my little thing.
Yeah, I appreciate you, especially talking about food, because it's, obviously it is sustenance. Food is life, and especially for the folks that were coming to you pre-COVID, obviously their needs have not changed. If anything, just intensified. So to know that, you found a way, and using the food in the pews, which I saw someone had posted in the chat, they're really great pictures of the pews full of food. I think that definitely gives people hope, because I know that there's a lot of just concern just with food in general, and masks, and you can't eat unless you take the mask off. And I had even heard of another church somewhere in Hell's Kitchen that was doing food, but they were doing outside dining. So they were able to kind of take over a large portion of the sidewalk so that folks could still eat, but they'd be eating outside. So I appreciate all the inspiration you've just given us. So just to kind of carry on the conversation, because we will have a chance for questions as well at the end of this section. So do you think, in terms of community outreach, and just thinking about like how we talked a little bit about this in the first segment, but has your message changed in how you reach the community? Or do you feel like how you reach the community has changed? Do you feel like your message has changed, or how you get out the word about doing anything? That's for everybody.
I'll just jump in real quick.
Sure,
But
go for it.
yes, I mean, all the above. We do all our worship online, and we have an offertory. Like, why, I don't know. But before that, we always have somebody from the congregation talking about, sort of thanking people for supporting, and also re-emphasizing the mission and the purpose of what's happening, and which we might not be doing, but that's been really nice. It being sort of like testimonials in the middle of service. And then exteriorly, I mean, it's great to, we have Upper West Side is a weird neighborhood, and obviously there's some very wealthy people here, as well as not wealthy people. And so just being outside on the street, I'm sure there's some of our neighbors who are really super annoyed with us, but also some who have caught on to the idea of it and have stepped up and helped in various ways. So that's been
kind of interesting that like things that were happening inside are not happening outside. There's an awareness factor there, and that could be an opportunity as well, in terms of especially the community you live in. I'm thinking about the people that have the more money. Could be an opportunity for them to kind of maybe think holistically about a different kind of donation, seeing the work that you're doing. So that's certainly, an idea. And I wonder, for Donna, Peter, and Kay, have you shifted your outreach priorities in light of COVID? Like, in other words, have you like moved resources from one place to go into another place in light of the pandemic, in light of people's change of life?
Yes, in two ways. One is that because of our location on Washington Square Park, we're doing something called Sanctuary for Protesters, which is socially distanced meeting space for people who are organizing events in the park and need a break, need a bathroom. And we've got volunteers doing that. And we did get a grant from the Soros Foundation to do that work, because they understood the need for meeting space for people to be able to organize and recoup. And I think that their language was, it was a harm reduction grant or a violence prevention grant, which I thought was very interesting. And secondly, in a completely different key, we started doing a food ministry, which we haven't done for decades, because Judson can be a very haughty place and very politically correct place. I mean, I adore it, obviously, but we overdo it. And we've always said, we don't do charity, we don't, we do systemic interventions. And the work in Sanctuary, the new Sanctuary movement, has driven us into more social services, I think, than we've ever done. And this pandemic has driven us into more social services. So those are two shifts. Plus, I already spoke about the shift to more virtual worship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is there any, is at any time, did you, in the concerns over the health crisis, did it ever put your work on pause, or if it did,
Yes,
for how long?
I'm very sorry to say that our Justice Arts Wednesday free supper and emerging artists program has been very much on pause and very much morphing, and we miss it so much. We just couldn't, we couldn't figure out how to engage people synchronously of a Wednesday. So we still have the arts programs, but very much not as many. And Karen, as you know, we rent to quite a few arts groups, and at market rates or low rates, depending on, who they are and who we are at the moment. And movement research has been on pause. The Greenwich Village Chorale has been on pause. So some of our major artistic groups are not working.
Yeah.
So
that's fairly common right now.
Right.
Kay, go ahead.
Peter.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, for the Council of Churches, we don't have a particular congregation. We're here to cheer on what other congregations are doing. Mm-hmm. And this is why what Kay has described and what Donna has described are, two important examples from whom I think other congregations can learn. And so we're really in the business of helping congregations learn to stretch themselves, to look at creative ways of using space. I do think that churches or congregations that relied heavily on rental revenue and have seen declines there and have had to kind of rethink what they're doing. But it hopefully lays the ground for better and more creative uses of space as we go forward.
Peter, while I have you kind of talking a bit, I would love to just kind of talk to you about the housing work. You had mentioned earlier the pre-development assessment. Do you want to, can you talk a little bit maybe about either like what are the most important things folks need to know about housing in New York City, or if we want to expand it statewide, because certainly we have a lot of folks on the line. And what is the pre-development assessment?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to hit a few points here for people to go on. And I mean, we could talk just about New York City, but really these principles apply to any community within the state of New York or nationally even. And I would just say that these rental things that we have been talking about become opportunities for congregations to get to know their neighbors. And I think that that is really the first order of business for congregations, not just the religious leader, but having the religious leader bring their parishioners with them to get out and meet people. Put your sign up, walk around the neighborhood, go to small shops, go talk to, you know, your local politicians, get to know your neighbors, and really to build on a conception of your congregation as not being comprised of the quote members in your building, but your congregation is your neighborhood, your community, whether those people ever come to your church or not. So I think that mindset is really important. I think in the housing space, you know, we were talking about artists here. If I were to bet, a lot of those artists are struggling with housing right now in terms of paying their rent. And this really should be leading the congregation into advocating for affordable housing on all its levels. If you have hostile neighbors running around telling homeless people they can't stay in hotels, this is really where the church, the congregation gets to take on things like institutional racism and make it real in terms of getting out there to public meetings and really advocating on behalf of people. And as you advocate, you meet more people and you build relationships, regardless of what you do with your property. And out of that relationship building that you do, congregations then really need to discern their mission. And, you know, we've been talking some about that here in this congregation. And I'm not talking about, you know, a 2-year study process to produce a big document that sits on somebody's shelf. I'm thinking of something much more interactive, and briefer, where you're discussing, you're organizing documents with your congregation, and then discussing what you've found out in your neighborhood with your congregants and your neighbors. And your mission probably should have something to do with leading you to serve the neighborhood and the community around you. It should not be geared towards serving yourself, like, gee, look how wonderful our church is, but serving others. And, you know, metaphorically speaking, I like to say, if you're Christian and looking at the gospel, and Jesus said, you know, for those who want to save their life, they are going to lose it. You know, those who lose their life for my sake will find it. So you really have to get people out of their self-preservation mode if, you know, as part of their mission. That mission's going to be really important so that you don't succumb to some developer who comes along and tells you that your salvation comes through building a lot of luxury condos and you need to make as much money as possible. And frankly, you could succumb to that pitch if you have not really thought about your mission and what matters to you as a congregation. So from that, I really want to say that congregations need to understand what they own and the potential for development. And it's necessary that this inquiry be done with the help of an attorney, an architect, an appraiser, and other professionals who work for your congregation and only your congregation. While we certainly want you to talk to developers, and eventually everybody's going to have to, do not sign anything like an MOU or pay some developer to do your legal architectural assessment work for you. If you aspire to build affordable housing, as I said, eventually you are going to want to negotiate with the developer, but that relationship is not going to be good unless you know what you own and you have somebody representing you and only you. It's important that if you pay for services or receive pro bono help in this stage, that it comes from people with expertise in faith-based development. So you don't want to be hiring my cousin Vinny to, you know, do your legal work for faith-based development. And we also strongly urge people not to hire a member of their congregation to do this work, so you have some independence. To get you through this stage, we really want you to call New York State Council Churches or Bricks and Mortals, Interfaith Assembly on Housing and Homelessness, and we all feed into what's called the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative. And we do have money available for New York City congregations through a grant from Trinity Church Wall Street, but we also have access to funds outside that grant of pre-development dollars, and also access to dollars around the state of New York, so not just New York City. And in order to qualify for that money, you need to really sit with us and think through the scope of your work, of what services are going to be required to. It's kind of like we're putting together with you a little grant application to get people to pay for the services that you need. And we'd also get you connected to your denominational partners who might help. You know, Bill Schilde's on this line from United Methodist City Society. They do great work in terms of walking congregations through these steps, and a whole variety of other kinds of entities. Dan,
Peter, I'm gonna take the, I'm sorry, I want to make sure we have enough time for questions too.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one other thing, and then
Sure,
we'll
go for it.
It's after you've assembled all this together, these pieces, that then working with your attorney, you would put together a request for proposal or request for qualification to then negotiate with the developer, but not before that. And you want a developer who knows a lot about securing financing for affordable housing.
Thank you, Peter. Again, I wanted to make sure we had enough time for questions. So I'm gonna toss it back to Rhonda, who hopefully has been checking that chat box and the Q&A box a lot more than I have.
Thank you. All right, so the first question we actually have is for Kay, and an anonymous registrant wanted to know what the process of working with Landmarks was like to get your roof repairs done.
Yeah, fortunately, thank you, Jesus, we were able to go through on the staff level, and we did not have to have a public hearing. those of you with landmark properties or in historical districts, this is a New York thing, but I'm sure Philly has its own nightmare scenarios. But, you know, like to have to go through a place where, I shouldn't say this because I represent our neighborhood with the Landmarks Commission now through the community board, but, you know, people can raise all sorts of very strange questions. Anyway, so that part, you know, we were basically fixing what needed to be fixed. So it's different than changing things. We also worked with the New York Landmarks Conservancy, which is a separate non-governmental organization, and they were helpful in getting expertise and also in some funding. We got 2 grants. I think the total from them was 65,000, which was super helpful. That's the Conservancy.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. So this is a question. This next question is for all panelists, and it's a 2-part question, also submitted by someone anonymous. And they're asking if there is a particular need that you realize that has taken the back burner during this time. And the second part of the question they ask is, what have you become aware of through the ministries that you now sponsor? And anyone can answer that question.
I'll be quick. I think long-range planning and strategic thinking have taken a real dive. Between the election and the chaos it has produced in our minds and hearts and souls. And I also think that the excitement around the reckoning might never have happened. The excitement got ignored in the rush and the chaos.
I'd like to pick up on something that Donna and Peter both alluded to, and that's this advocacy piece. And it's I don't know, it's in some ways it's harder to not have a space where it's that easy to gather people, or at least large groups of people. And but all the focus online has been kind of helpful. We've been very involved in this West Side Hotels nonsense. Those of you from New York may have been following that. So, but we've been able to be really supportive of all that and help with the these spiritual walk and talks that we've done with people who are staying at the hotels from the shelters, and also just advocating like hell, for their well-being. And so so that's been a change and a challenge.
Well, I was a pastor for 27 years in 3 congregations in New England and also the Midwest. In my first church, we actually built a housing development, so I have some experience with that. But a lot of times these conversations in churches, the advocacy and social justice get somehow disconnected from the board of trustees overseeing the property. And what I think this time has shown us is that these things are profoundly interrelated. And the more that these crises are just thrust upon our churches, I mean, congregations where, 30% of the people sitting in their pews can't afford their rent, and homeless people who cannot stay in congregate shelters and need to be in hotel rooms to be safe. This just really brings it home for folks, and saying you just can't sit on the sidelines. You got to get out there and start doing justice and advocating for these systemic problems. Against these systemic problems, in the state of New York right now, we just do a lot of hand wringing about waiting for the federal government to save us with COVID money, and we're not looking at massive wealth inequality in our state, where billionaires really should be paying more money. So we got to worry about these things and speak up and pay attention, because it has a direct economic and health effect on our congregations if we don't do something.
So we have one last question submitted to the chat, and the question reads, if you were to advocate for an incubator program, what issue would you incubate about? And there's no context to this question, so I think it's fairly open-ended about, in terms of COVID and the issues that we're currently facing, what would you incubate?
Wow. I'll kind of throw an answer to that, and then folks can kind of chime in. So just from my own perspective, and having worked with a lot of different denominations and faiths across the country, I think that there are, and Donna kind of alluded to this a little bit, there are a lot of fires out there, both real and like actual fires, and then other. So I think that in terms of that introspection, that congregational introspection, pick things that you are passionate about as a congregation and that reflect your mission, and focus on those. When you focus on everything, it's so much to actually handle, and you can't actually take a large bite out of it. So I have found in these times to focus in on something where you think you can really make an impact on someone in a very real way, and even better if it's someone that's in close proximity to your space and to your house of worship. Then that, I think, makes it all the more meaningful, both now and after we get through this as a country. So that is kind of what I'm going to say from the 80,000 foot level. But I'd love to hear what other folks have to say.
Well, just to pick up on that, Karen, thank you. I mean, it's pretty easy to look at the broad stuff and lose sight of the tangibles in your congregation. But pick an energy point in your church and then build around it. When we are in the housing space, we can't just think about building a box. It's about the services that surround it. It's about a community. It's about the arts. It's about creating a community, not just some hole that we live in. I know out in California that my friend has done stuff with Art Spirit, where they really connected the arts to building 25 tiny homes in Oakland or Berkeley, California, for homeless youth. But it's just infused with the arts, colors and paintings, and just really thinking about, what does this look like? How do we feel as human beings? Is this a space for the arts and a place that houses artists who can live here? And how can we be a blessing on our community? So just really looking constantly for the interconnections.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a quick answer to the incubator question, I think our approach is to try to stay open to the Spirit. Sometimes the Spirit arrives in the form of an email or a phone call from somebody who's like, well, can you help me with this? And so we're trying to do that with our arts program. We have a lovely theater that has been dark for the last 6 months, and we finally are getting some ways to use it through remotely for people to do performances here very carefully and live stream them or else film them. We're meeting today with folks from the Harlem Clementi course, which is a college course sponsored by Bard College, which is currently needing a home. A great program, so maybe we can help with that. And so every day something comes up, and sometimes it's not going to happen here. Maybe it could happen somewhere else, but we try to stay up. I picture Judson's approach to be also very much that way of staying open to possibilities that might come by.
And if you think of everybody in your neighborhood, in your community, and what they contribute to the ecosystem and how these things interconnect, so that your church or congregation isn't doing everything, but it's really sees itself as contributing to an interconnected web of people and offerings and relationship building. You know, I think that really helps a lot.
Yeah, I agree. We all need community now more than ever. So I am going to wrap up things. It's 11:59. I want to make sure that we kind of end things on time. So just so everyone in attendance knows, I believe all contact information and different links are going to be sent your way via Rhonda. She's on top of that scene. So I want to thank all of our panelists, Ingrid and Shelley and Dania, Kay, Peter, Donna, Jason for introducing us. And I want to just lift up the Bricks and Mortals team, Kate Toth and Rhonda Davis, for just, you're really obviously the backbone of a burgeoning effort. So I also want to extend to all of our attendees that I hope that some of you are interested in participating in my program, and you can find out more about that. But I hope that we in general have inspired you to think about your immediate future, to plan in those uncertain times, but to continue to produce your mission-based work, putting your communities front and center. So that is going to be kind of what my final note is for everybody. And thank you for joining us.